Hi guys, welcome back. So this peculiar looking little thing in front of you is the new test rig that I've built for the channel. This is hopefully going to give us, well, it's going to rule out a lot of variables, all being well, through the testing going forward. The biggest one of those is myself. Now of course, we're all wobbly human beings mostly. We are usually the weakest link with the majority of our shooting. However, this should mean that we can do some more accurate testing. We should be able to then look at who makes the best barrels, optimising the setups. There's an awful lot of things that we can use this for as opposed to just clamping the rig down. Now this thing is huge. It's got a great big machinist vise on the top, great big steel disc underneath of that. It weighs just over 50 kilos, so that's just over 110 pounds. You can see underneath of the action there we've got a little slab of laminate. It looks a little bit like a hamster there. That is exactly how that action would be bolted into a custom laminate stock. We've got an awful lot of different things that we can use this rig to test. So not just the accuracy of rifles and how inaccurate I am, but we can certainly then look at which woods make the best stock materials, which are the best at absorbing any sort of firing cycle vibrations and things like that. Now I don't think for a moment that this rig is going to be as easy to use as it looks. There's almost certainly going to be a knack to getting the best from it. I do have a little adjuster on the back there so I can adjust the elevation a little bit. It's definitely going to be a bit tricky to get this onto a target. However, today what we've got here, we've got 5 different pellets. They're all JSB made, so we've got Exact Express Diablos. These are the lightest, these are a 7.9. The rest are all exact variants. So we've got 2 lots of Diablo fields, the old FX branded 8.4s, and then the exact shorts there. So we're going to basically start off with some testing, see which of these 5 different pellets is the best through this rig. Then later in the video, and maybe later in the week for me, I'm actually going to go and test these indoors. I'm going to take the rifle to the range, put it all back together and see what sort of results I can get on some cards in some controlled environments. Now ideally this all wants to be done indoors. In time we will take this all indoors once I'm at the new club, but for the moment we haven't got an awful lot of wind, so we're going to test this down the sheltered spot, see how it goes. But first of all I need to just run off a few control groups. Right, let's get into it and see if we can all learn something, eh? Right, typical dad's got the strimmer out now, but we've got a little benchrest card down the end at the moment. I'm actually not looking at anything other than group size, so don't worry about where the point of impact is relative to the point of aim. We're simply going to be judging the group size between all of these, and then once we get it clamped up, hopefully we can rule out some of my little wobbles and shakes from the wobbly table. So my average group size down here with most of these pellets is somewhere in the region of sort of 7 to 8 millimeters, which is not really benchrest accurate. Right then, so just under 25 yards, the Exact Expresses, we get pretty much little fingernail groups. That's probably in the region of just over 8 millimeters across. We'll keep all these cards and we're going to actually keep these for the future as well, so we've got some really good reference points. But that seems to be about my average that I shoot off of that table, with most average ammo, to be honest. Most of your comedy pellets will be lucky to do that. However, what we need to do now then is get this test rig all set up. We're going to pull the action out of its stock. We've got a huge amount of things that we can test with this rig. Most importantly though, we need to see whether or not the rig itself resets to 0 and that the point of aim doesn't move when we're loading it and shooting it and through its firing cycle. So there's an awful lot to do, so let's get stuck into it, shall we? Right then, I guess the first thing that we do is just send it. So we're roughly on the target, we're just a little bit high. Don't worry at any point about the actual point of impact relative to the target. All we're looking for at the moment is group size to see how they vary. Now, on the cocking cycle on this, it does seem to move the rifle slightly. I can see it through the scope that the point of aim slightly wanders on the target. It does, however, seem to come back to its resting position. I think a lot of that's down to this table being a bit wobbly, but let's stop chatting. Let's just get a few shots off and see whether or not it actually works. But the firing cycle through the scope looks flipping awful. Right, go is on. What we will do once we've got a few groups shot, we're going to look at these in comparison to what an Olympic 10 metre match rifle, i.e. one of those in Olympic trim, is capable of doing. Because I think you might be surprised at how much dispersion or the group sizes that even the most accurate rifles in the world shoot. The average 10 metre rifle in Olympic trim will be lucky to do a 6mm group at only 10 metres. Maybe 1 in 1,000. I mean, to do a 4.5mm group, so basically bang them through exactly the same hole, is an absolute pipe dream. It does not happen. 5.5mm, so 1mm of dispersion at 10 metres, that would be a really, really rare thing. We're basically looking for sort of 6mm or below at 10 metres. What are we going to get at 25 yards is anyone's guess. That sight picture looks flipping awful. It looks way more jumpy clamped up like this. I need to sit down, I think, because I'm not in a particularly comfortable position. Well, that group looks worse than my control group. Let's go and have a look at it, shall we? Right, typically it's on the little black marks. You can see there that it is a very small group. So that's my control group. That's probably in the region of 8mm. That's definitely less. What I need to do is actually get some different target card. I've got some chopped up cards here, proper NSRA cards. I've certainly got a small amount of movement in my table. I think we need to look at something more substantial there. And the sight picture itself is flipping horrible. So I need to do something about that as well. Work out quite why it's as bad as it is. Because you certainly can't see that jumpy sight picture when you're shooting it. So. Right, last week at the club I collected up a load of the old shot cards and then trimmed off all of the decent little pieces we've got. So this is the stuff that the NSRA cards are made from. It's there's a certain type of fibre that they use, so you get very clean holes in it. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I don't know if it's short fibre or long fibre or whatever, but this is the stuff that the proper target cards are made from, and it's supposed to be quite a lot easier. Now the cards that we regularly use do get quite torn up. Hopefully this will give us good quality holes that we can accurately measure. So I'm going to go and stick that over the group that we've just shot, and we'll go again, shall we? Okay, so hopefully you can see then that I've just crudely taped the fancy card on top of the other little group that we've shot. Now, this is taking bench rest, extreme bench rest, to a whole new level. That's really jumpy. That's really surprising. Now I'm desperately trying not to touch the table when I get these shots off. We may need to stick this on the ground. We have to lower everything down. Now, of course, the firing point here steps down if you've watched any of the videos before. So it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Wow. How was that down there? What's moved? What's happened? Very, very odd. Right, let's I'm going to shuffle this over just a tiny little bit. I think that might be just movement in the old rig itself. Well, they don't look that great, to be honest. Them groups don't look much better really than I'd shoot just off of the back of my left hand. Let's go and have a quick nose at those. I think we need to put the rig down on the ground. Right, well, apart from that one fly, which I literally can't account for in the slightest, pellets felt pretty good in there. We've used these before, we know they're decent batches. We've still got two stacked side by side. So if you've watched any of the previous videos where I use JSP heavies and the likes, that's pretty much my average group size down here in sort of fairly still conditions. So the group that I did shoot, that was just after a barrel clean, yeah, not too bad. Marginally tighter, but nowhere nearly as tight as I'd imagine. What we're going to do now, I think, is at least try and put the rig onto the ground so it can't move. I think we've got a little bit more movement in that table than I can actually account for. So hopefully we'll stick it on the deck. It should be nice and solid there and shouldn't be able to go anywhere. So I'm going to try and move it all around now. Right, so it's got a really weird balance point to it. I'm able to lift with a twisting and jerking motion. Oh yeah, heavy fuck. Feels like at any point it's going to cut my hand off. Right, I'll clamp the rifle in it and we'll see if we can just angle it up onto a target. Oh, now we're shooting F-class. Okay, that's not too bad. We can work with that. Right, that actually feels pretty stout, and surprisingly, I'm just about on a target. I'm going to quickly go and put another piece of fresh fancy card over to the right-hand side of that, and we'll see if we can get a group off, shall we? Right, I should have guessed that the table was going to be a little bit on the wobbly side. Oh, that looks better. There's still just the most microscopic bit of movement on that last part of the cocking stroke there. It does appear to go back to its position, so... Right, fire in a hole. Right, that's peculiar. The point of impact is now different since we've reclamped it again. And the sight picture itself looks a lot more still. So it must have just been some of that vibration through the table. Oh, I watched that one in flight all the way through go clean through that hole. Now it literally just skimmed it. Now this is the sort of groups that we're after. But I do think we need to have an even more substantial base than we've got now. This is the most unusual shooting position. And that doesn't look too bad. That certainly looks like a decent enough group for probably bench rest at 25 yards. pest control, HFT, FT, yeah, brilliant. Right, I'm going to swap that card over now for a fresh piece. We'll leave this exactly where it is. We'll just put the card out again, and then we're going to work our way through the other pellets and see whether or not they're any better or any worse, whether the sight picture changes. And also my scope looks like it's really canted. I don't quite know why, I can't work it out. I've kind of lost all bearing at the moment, but maybe I've manhandled it earlier when I had the barrel and everything out. Maybe I've knocked it, because it definitely looks like it's pissed. So let's get this swapped around, shall we? Right, well now we're getting somewhere. Look at that. That's probably, I mean, that looks like it's got to be benchrest accurate. We will measure these up properly when we get home. So I'm just going to swap over now to the Die 1 AA fields. It's going to be easier, I think, to move the target than it is to move the rifle, while that seems to be settled in a fairly sort of decent position. So let's get it all swapped over, shall we? Right then, Die 1 AA fields. These are from 2023, so they're still probably a current batch. They can be bought if you need more of them. Just run a couple off, of course. Oh, something's buzzing down here. I think it's a bee down here. Right, so that's actually bang on my crosshairs at the moment. Now, we've done quite a lot of testing with this rifle before. I've had it on the channel here for a couple of years. Doesn't usually take too long to settle down after a pellet swap. Usually sort of between 6 shots and 12 shots. Well, that card's getting quite well torn up. Just chuck a couple more through it quickly. That's weird. I'm just looking down at the target. Loading the rifle, not even sighting it through the scope. Very strange. Right, well, if you'd shot that offhand, just off the table, you'd probably be quite happy with that. I think what I'm going to do is actually just attempt to shuffle this around a little bit. I mean, you can't feel that there's any movement in that. That feels solid, but looking through the scope, it's definitely moving, yet you can't feel it. We've probably got, I'm looking at the back of the target there, down range, that probably equates to about 1mm. So one of you clever lot can probably tell me how much movement I've got this end, but you can't feel it because of the weight of this. There's no obvious play in it, but we are literally getting about 1mm at the target end. But it doesn't look as if the cocking movement on this is enough to actually shift it. So let's go again, just shuffled it over, so just to the left of the one we just shot. Wow, that's pretty scattered. Right, let's go for another one. Okay, so we're another just over an inch probably to the left of the one we've just shot. Now there's only the most gentle breath of wind today. Just checking where my thumb was on the back of the action then. And there's not enough, I can't move that point of aim there at all. That's really solid actually on the target, but that's a pretty rough looking group. Let's go and have a look at that quick. Right, well that's pretty rough in the grand scheme of things. That's 10 shots through there straight after swapping over. Now we know that between 6 shots and 12 shots it's pretty much bang on, but it's certainly showing no signs of getting any tighter. It certainly feels like it's pretty well seated at the moment on the ground. So we're going to swap over now to the Die 7s and see whether they're any better or any worse. Right, Die 7s. We're going to come in a little bit to the, well, probably about the middle left of the card at the moment. Right, Die 7 AA fields, little tiny cloverleaf groups. I mean, if we had just shot those off of the bench, off the back of my hand, we're probably quite happy with those, but now we know what we can get using 7.9s. Absolutely perfect though if you were HFTing, field target shooting, pest controlling, whatever, your average air rifle stuff, apart from pushing for the nth degree of accuracy as we are in this test. However, Certainly it gives you a good idea of how different batches, different dyes of effectively the same pellet will perform, especially now we've got it clamped up. We've got very little in the way of sort of wiggle room on the rifle now. Now it's settled down nicely on the ground. Yeah, pretty interesting. I was expecting the results to be a little bit wild, but I was hoping they might all be a little bit tighter than this. So I'm going to swap over now to one of the others. I want to quickly grab a drink because I'm getting quite warm. I've got a bit of a stiff neck now, so get everything moved around, shall we? Right, 2022 JSB Exact shorts. We've used these on the channel before. Actually put in some really good groups with these through the Anschutz actually in the factory barrel. We actually put in some really blinding groups at 45 yards. I've swapped the cards around. You can see that I've just replaced the back card as well. Now, one problem we have got with these, the remnants of those in the tin, there's probably about 80-90 left in the tin. They're a little bit crusty now. They've all been manhandled. There's a little bit of oxidisation on them. Have any of you twigged yet why the old 2016 Exact Expresses are doing as well as they are? That's when I got the Anschutz. I batch tested a load of stuff back then. Edits were readily available. Now, I had no real use for Exact Expresses, never really liked to use them in the wind, but they proved to be a pretty good batch, so I bought a ton of them back then, full well knowing that eventually I'd use them, and the pellets were only ever getting more expensive. Looks like it may well have paid off, eh? Now, of all the recent batches of JSBs that I've used, the Exact shorts have been by far and away some of the best and the most consistent. Now, these are the same pellets that they sell as the premium ones in their fancy packaging. Now, these are apparently just an unsorted version, but they don't import them into the UK, so we have to import these from Germany. So we get the expensive versions, but not these ones which are absolutely blinding. Saw that one coming a little bit to the right. Yeah, these feel a little bit grotty on the old fingers. Now, of course, the main thing at this stage, we're basically batch testing. We'll put these in rank order of the best to the worst, and then the ones that are the best, then we'll look at taking them further, whether we can optimise the setup on the actual rifle itself, whether we can adjust the speed to fine-tune them groups even more. I don't think we're going to get an awful lot tighter than we did. Just had a quick look while I was having a drink. The first group that I shot, just off the back of my hand, looks to have been a benchrest accurate group, which is pretty cool. It looks to be about just under 6mm, which at this sort of range is pretty good, especially considering we're outdoors. And there's not an awful lot of wind to speak of, but there is still always a bit more air movement down here. Obviously we're in a bit of a tunnel shaped piece here. It's open down the right at the end there. So the wind always does peculiar things in here. And even at this sort of level of accuracy we're after, what, 0.5mm is going to make a fairly big difference to them group sizes when you're comparing like for like. So yeah, pretty interesting. One thing that I did find with these, they were quite consistent to judge in the wind. They drifted quite nicely, didn't seem to get any wild flyers at sort of 45-50 yards. They were pretty easy to judge where they were going, which ultimately, group size on paper like this, unless you're a benchrest shooter, is not necessarily the most important thing. I would quite happily have a slightly larger group on paper, just so that I knew I had a pellet that was consistent downrange, like the JSB heavies that we use. Haven't brought any of those today. We're going to do that in some further testing, but those, they're definitely not benchrest accurate at this range, but at the extreme ranges, they're very consistent. They're easy to judge. I've spent so much time using those now, it's almost like a bit of an intuition and know where I should be aiming off, and that for me is way more important than just being able to blag about having super tight groups. But what we're going to do, carry on with this, we're going to move this over now, then we're going to go on to my old competition pellets, which are them FX branded ones. That's absolutely bang on the crosshairs. That last shot, that was not a bad one. It's just taking up that middle bit of paper. It's made the group look tidier. Bit bigger than we'd want, but now it's a 1-0 group. A big 1-0 group. Alright, let's shuffle it across again. Oh, not that far, shoot the pissing GoPro. Okay, right, that's dead stable. We're actually, okay, we're about another 1.5 inches left, but this slot's going to come in slightly lower than the last couple of groups.
Oh my god, why is that one right up there? It was really weird off the table. The whole thing was vibrating. Now we will better use this once we've got the hang of it. I definitely need to do some improvements to the feet and everything on this, but what we will do, we'll start looking at the old air strippers in more detail in the controlled environments. Then we'll look at some barrel tuners, all manner of things, and then we'll start looking at these little bedding blocks that they're on, because I could absolutely wreck the grouping of this in an instant just by changing the way that this is mounted in the vise here. And if I'm feeling brave at some point, I may actually clamp the actions directly in the vise, but not over keen on that. Okay, still a little bit scattered. We're definitely going to retest these at a later date with a fresh tin, because like I say, these are a little bit crusty, these ones. I mean, if we'd shot that off the back of my hand off of the wobbly bench, you'd be quite happy with those as groups. Let's go and have a quick look, shall we?
Well, I mean, not terrible, considering how many went into those groups to start with. I mean, that is not quite benchrest accurate, I don't think. But we haven't prepped these. Don't forget, these are straight from the tin. They've got a little bit of oxidisation on them. I think we can probably do a bit better with those with a fresh tin. They're certainly decent to use at range in the wind when we're out sort of HFTing it up, if you like. Sort of more field target orientated targets. So yeah, interesting. The little rig definitely needs some improvements. We've got a lot more experiments that we can do with this, but I think what we'll do now, I'm going to quickly top up the old Anschutz, and then we'll go on to my old competition pellets from back in the day.
We're on to the 2010 FX branded Exact. Now these were the old comp pellets that I was using back in 2010 to 2012, 13 through my old EV2, and it was an absolute beast with these pellets. One of the cleanest dyes that we'd ever seen, and this will make you spit. These were about £5, yeah, about 50 quid a sleeve I was paying back then. Managed to get some really good deals. I haven't got many tins left now though. I've only got probably 5-6 tins left. Right, don't forget we've just filled this up, and them last pellets were a little bit crusty, so we're just towards the bottom left of the card. Hopefully we should be somewhere there or thereabouts. Well, that second one's gone back straight on my crosshairs, which is surprising because the scope's as cockeyed as it is. Right, let's go again. Let's see if I can do this sitting up. This is an unusual position to be loading a rifle in. This is really, really weird. Watching them pellets go down the range from above. I think going forward, what we need to do, we need to look at a freestanding chronograph, something like an LMBR or something like that, so when we start tuning everything we can get a readout straight away. Now I've got an 8 chrony, which is really good, but it's a barrel mounted one, which it has its limitations. I wouldn't want that on the barrel at the moment actually for doing anything in the way of sort of fine tuning or anything like that, so possibly something like an LMBR. I also think what we need is something like a laser, possibly mounted to this front portion of the block. Again, something that we can transfer between all of the other guns, so that will project a laser spot down the end there, which will mean we can test without a scope, but it'll also give you something to keep an eye on. We could then potentially shine the laser beam down on the target, then we could put a mark on it, and then we could absolutely check that the point of aim isn't wandering through the strings. That would definitely be very useful. When the Olympic boys are using these, they actually have like a scat trainer, a target tracker. Well, that's harder to say. They have a scat trainer, which is basically a target tracker, and that monitors to make sure that the point of aim is consistent through the little shot strings that they're doing. We don't quite have the money for one of those just yet on the channel, I'll tell you that, but I think certainly the next thing, chrono and a little rifle mounted laser is going to be very useful, because it's really awkward. We also need a big 4-legged frame. Don't think I need rubber feet on it, because I think that might induce a little bit of wobble in it, but we definitely need to get this up off the deck, and we need to make this a bit more stable. And it's just starting to rain as well. Maybe we can get out of here just before it tips it down. I'm surprised. I thought these would have probably done better. They don't look like they're going to tighten up. I mean, that's still perfectly acceptable for pretty much anything other than benchrest. These are a relatively long pellet. These actually came in slightly overweight. They were actually more like 8.6 grains, somewhere there or thereabouts, if I remember right. but these were really good in the wind. I had a pretty good intuition to where they'd end up going, which, as I've mentioned already, I'd much rather know exactly what they're doing in the wind than have a microscopic group on paper. It does appear, see, as I pull on the lever, I can just see it move just the smallest amount to the right, and then it sort of returns back to its settled position almost. I think we've been quite lucky with the testing to start with. Now, of course, once we can get this indoors into much more controlled conditions, work out the best way to get this leveled off, get it all a bit more stable, then the results are going to be even better. Pair that up with a laser and a chrono, and away we go. That should, going forward, give us significantly better results to all of our tests. It'd be fun to put some of the comedy pellets through it as well, just to see how good they are. I'll tell you what we do need to do. We need to come back to them Crossmans, the Benjamin versions of the Crossmans, the ones that I just couldn't get any sense out of. I think they're probably the one I'm most looking forward to testing through this, because I could not get a group out of those. And I tried hard. I spent the best part of a week messing about with those to no joy. So I think it would be really cool to actually get them through here. But when you get all this sorted, the next thing you're probably going to see, I'll have put this all back together. We're going to be at the indoor range, and I'm going to be testing by the look of things with the 7.9s and see what sort of grouping I can get. So I'll see you in a few days, but of course that'll be a moment for you. I'll see you then.
Right now, guys, it's a few days later. I didn't really get a chance to film much at the range, unfortunately, but here are the cards that I shot. I spent too much time yakking. I've obviously met a load of new people since I've joined the club, so I'm really glad that I've managed to actually step out of my comfort zone, get down to the club, meet some new people, and obviously give us on the channel here some sort of areas to shoot with a much more controlled environment. So 9015 is absolutely still on fire, so we need to go through these results. There's quite a lot to cover here, so I'm going to move these cards around quickly, but the long and short of it is that them old 2016 exacts, I certainly wouldn't use those outdoors. In fact, we've done a video with those previously. Actually, we did the 8.4s, the 7.9s, and then the JSP heavies in the wind. Phenomenally accurate in controlled conditions with low wind, but absolutely spitefully wild in the wind. So yes, they're a really good pellet, but actually, other than using them probably indoors and potentially on some very low wind days, I'm unlikely to actually be using those, which is kind of ironic. Right, I'm going to move all these around quickly. Right, first up then, once we finally got a proper control group with the rifle clamped, that's absolutely phenomenal. I knew it was a tight group, but obviously I didn't measure it when we was up the farm, as you can see. Got it back. That actually measures 5.48 millimeters edge to edge. Now that is absolutely phenomenal. To be honest, even your top end 10 meter shooters, your Olympic athlete shooters would be happy with that at 10 meters. I've got to be honest, I'm really quite surprised by that. The 9015 is absolutely battered. The fact that we can still do that with decent ammo is really quite, I'm so happy with that, to be honest. Also, the most important thing with this is now I know that the rifle will shoot basically a 5.5 millimeter group. Anything larger than that is down to myself. Now the two control groups, this was the group that I shot last night at the club, indoors off the bench, in a very similar setup actually to what we shoot on the farm. So my indoor group was 7.68 millimeters across. That's the widest part of that group there. So you can see there's a little bit of left to right movement. Similar group shape to the group that I shot outdoors. You can see, of course, that there was very little wind when we tested that. So 7.7 millimeters, which seems to be about my average on the channel here. Most of the pellets, that's my sort of natural wobble, my natural heart rate and everything else. So marginally smaller indoors, but basically that's me, okay? The rifle can do significantly better. I shot a 10 shot group as well, and that's just under a centimetre. Up on the card here, I was just adjusting, checking my elevation and checking the windage, obviously going from outdoors to indoors, just making sure everything was bang on. You can see here I worked my way around the card. Pretty good, to be honest. Quite a few shots that are actually well in the X's here. This one sort of skewed off a little bit, but again, that's sort of still within my average group size. A couple of the sighters that I shot, took the centres right out of those, so I'm really happy. And of course, now that I know that the rifle will do a 5.5 millimeter group, it just gives me that mindset, right, I need to pull my act together, concentrate, work on my breathing. So the whole testing that we've done with the clamping rig, yes, it's a bit nerdy, but I now know that these pellets will do it, the rifle will do it, and anything else is just down to me. I do want to show you some of the results though from the other pellets that we shot. Right, these are the Air Arms Field. So two seemingly identical tins but different dies. So die 1 and die 7 from 2023. You can see here that the die 7's grouped in the clamping rig marginally better. We've got sort of a few more sort of outliers here in the die 1s. Now the Catran shoots the die 1s really well, and the die 7s shoot really, really well through the XTI. I was kind of hoping actually that we'd get a chance to sort of fine tune the speeds and stuff like that. So going forward, we're going to use the clamping rig to actually see if we can improve the groups marginally. I don't think that the die 1s we're going to be able to tighten them up a lot, but these die 7s, I reckon if we reduce the speed a little bit, we'll fine tune that over the chrono and see if we can improve those. And we can definitely improve on the exact shorts through the 9015. I reckon if we bring this down into the 750 to 760 feet per second range, we can tighten those groups up an awful lot. The old FX branded exacts, now these were the pellets out of my old competition EV2. That shot them beautifully. Look, not really great through the 9015. I don't think there's much chance that we can actually tighten those up by tuning, so we're going to probably forget about those through that barrel. The XTI shoots those really nicely as well. Right, this one's quite a telling one. So this was the clamping rig on the table. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, the sight picture was absolutely terrible. Now, the table isn't that wobbly, but I've got a real lot of resonance on firing through that. The sight picture is awful until we got that down on the deck. So it's really interesting, and also goes to show how hard it is to actually clamp that rifle so that it doesn't move. We do need to do some further modifications to the clamping rig. I want to put a laser on the actual rifle itself so we can project a laser dot onto the targets. Now, it's actually easier to move the target than it is the rifle, but if I can project a laser beam sort of dot onto there, look. Imagine we've got a red laser dot projected onto there. At least then you can see downrange whether or not the point of aim is moving through the cocking procedure and everything else. So that's going to be interesting going forward. So yeah, an awful lot to do then, guys. I'm really, really happy with how it went. I'm enjoying shooting at the range. Shooting indoors off of a bag seems pretty easy, but when you've got the butt of the rifle in your shoulder, you're shooting off your gloved hand, it's really quite a challenge. And I need to now do some sort of light modifications to the 9015. I need to change the geometry a little bit. I need to be able to get my hand flat under the butt end of the rifle. At the moment, the rests are a little bit higher than I want, so I've got a clenched fist underneath. Now, of course, the rifle's sat on here, bit of pulse movement. Of course, I can't feel this web all the way through here. It's absolutely, when I chop my hand, that's really quite dodgy still. So I need to be able to get my hand completely flat, move the butt of the rifle up across the back of my hand to reduce any pulse movement. But we've got some decent benchmark figures to work from. So indoors 7.68. I'm going to keep all of these cards, and any further testing we do when we're indoors or outdoors, we can see if I'm working on my technique or not. So I'm super glad that I've spent the time. It's taken me a couple of weeks to put this video together, but going forward we're going to be able to do some much more pedantic testing. Eventually I'll take the test rig indoors so we can cut out the wind and everything else, and then we can really see how accurate these rifles are. Over the next few days I'm going to see if I can work on a bedding block or something like that to get the XTI into the clamping rig, because I don't want to clamp that on the stock or on the hamster, of course. Quite a valuable thing, so I don't really want to muck it up. So I'm going to make an interface piece like a little hamster that I had on the 9015. Then we're going to see if we can do some further testing with that, because I think certainly at the longer ranges the XTI seems to have an edge over the 9015. Of course, this was originally built as a 10-meter rifle. It shoots phenomenally out to 25, but as I've mentioned a few times before, out at sort of 60 yards it starts to open up a little bit, so maybe we can work on that as well. Yeah, I'm really happy how it's all turned out. I'm going to start optimising this gear with a few bolt-on pieces just so that we can do a bit more of the indoor shooting. I'm so glad as well that I started the YouTube channel. It's pushed me out of my comfort zone, do different types of testing. I've met so many new people, and I probably would never have got into this sort of stuff. We're not going to go suddenly into all benchrest shooting. We're still going to be covering everything, but it's a really good excuse for me to get out, try new stuff. And of course, the more we learn, put it all on here, maybe we can all just question everything, and maybe we can push the sport forward a little bit more. So that'll do it for this one, guys. I will catch you in the next one.